I am former State Senator Jeff Brandes, all of a month away from being out of political office, but it is truly an honor to have you all here. To think about the last 10 years and all we've gone through and be seen. Understand, this conference has been around longer than Uber and Lyft have been in Florida, longer than the scooters that are now on our streets and the e-bikes that we see at scale have been around. And it got here because 10 years ago, when I was in the Florida House, I recognized that there was nothing on this coast, there was no conversations going on this coast at scale talking about the future of transportation and mobility. Many of you may not know that before I served in the legislature, I spent 11 years in the military. And while I was in Iraq with the 101st in 2003, 2004, I recognized for my soldiers, it would have been a lot better had we not had to be in the vehicles, getting mortared and IED'd and having those experiences. When I joined the legislature, I was a part of a very talented class of young legislators and tried to figure out how I had to separate myself out from my colleagues. And I thought, you know what? There is one big idea in probably every area of public policy. So how do I go out and find that big idea? So for me, somebody with a little bit of ADD, I figured, hey, I need a quick way to find some new ideas. And so I started watching TED Talks. And the amazing thing is, between the 4-hour drive between St. Petersburg and Tallahassee, in my old car, my iPhone fit perfectly on the windshield there, and I could listen to TED Talks the entire way up. And I did that up until I came across Sebastian Thrun's discussion on self-driving cars. And to be honest, I was captivated. That was to me the big idea. That was something that was revolutionary and game-changing. Now, taking a big idea like that and trying to get it through the Florida legislature the first year is an incredibly challenging issue. I remember my legislative aide, my first year, said, don't do that. People will think you're crazy. Nobody in the country is talking about self-driving cars. If you go in there and that's what you lead with, you're going to be put in the corner. So I did what I think any good legislative aide any legislator would do, is I got a new legislative aide, one that was not nearly as good at talking me out of things. And we got started, and we passed really what was the second law in the country as it relates to the future of mobility and self-driving. Over the last 12 years, we have done 4 new iterations of that bill and really put Florida in the driver's seat when it comes to allowing this technology to grow and thrive. Why? Because while I was in Iraq, I read a book called Milton Friedman's book called Capitalism and Freedom. And I tried to think, how would Milton Friedman regulate self-driving vehicles? And I think he would do it the way Florida has done it, which is to simply let insurance be the proxy. What you realize is, in government, nobody wants to declare a vehicle safe. No bureaucrat, no politician wants to be responsible for saying this vehicle is safe. And frankly, as we're talking to multiple AV companies that are innovating all the time, nobody at DOT or highway safety wants to have to learn the code and have to go behind the scenes on the code to try to understand how to regulate that. So what Florida did, and what makes us different, and what has made us a leader in the country, is to say, we're going to use insurance as a proxy. And so we put a high insurance dollar amount on operating those vehicles in the state, and we use them in the insurers who have skin in the game. Because at the end of the day, the bureaucrats don't have skin in the game, and definitely the politicians who are going to term out in a couple of years don't have skin in the game. But the companies do, and their insurers do. And that policy has gone around the country, where many of the states are now looking at Florida, saying, let's do it that way. Why? Because it's simple and it's straightforward. But that has led to a larger conversation about how mobility is changing the world. So I am ending my legislative career, or have ended it, and before all of you come up, all 500 people in this room, and say what I'm going to do next, let me tell you. So one of the things I've recognized is that after 10 years of being in this process, I couldn't tell you who the affordable housing expert is in Florida. Couldn't tell you. Who the criminal justice expert is in Florida. I really couldn't tell you. Transportation-wise, our team has been leading in transportation for the last decade, but who's coming after us? I couldn't tell you. And property insurance, everybody here who lives in Florida is seeing what's going on. We've just had a second special session in property insurance. So I think that the best use of my time is to start a nonprofit to work on identifying the best practices in those 4 policy areas, finding the experts, figuring out where Florida is against those best practices, and trying to figure out how to get there. I think we underutilize our public universities in that conversation. So we're going to be partnering with our public universities to identify those best practices. So I'm incredibly excited to talk about what we're going to call the Florida Policy Project. You'll see it being launched in January of next year, but we're going to be really having a conversation, doing conferences similar to this on criminal justice, on housing affordability, probably not transportation because there's enough, probably not insurance because there's enough discussion on insurance going on right now throughout the state. But I'm really excited about what the future of the Florida Policy Project is, the Florida Automated Vehicle Summit is, and all of the great work you and I are going to get to do, not only for the last decade, for the next decade to come. So I am incredibly excited right now to introduce Nat Ford from the Jacksonville Transportation Authority, our host organization this year, to kind of talk and welcome you all to Jacksonville. Thank you so much, and we're so glad you're here, and we've got a great program for you. Thank you.